rain poured relentlessly, drumming against the city streets as Emma Carter clutched her mother's frail hands, her heart pounding. The beeping monitors, the sterile hospital walls, everything felt suffocating. The doctor's words still echoed in her mind. Without immediate surgery, your mother's condition will only worsen. Emma swallowed hard. She had tried everything. Extra shifts, side jobs, loans. But nothing was enough. They were drowning in medical bills and she was running out of time. As she stepped out into the cold night, her phone buzzed. Nathan Hale, her boss. The ruthless billionaire who had built his empire from the ground up. A man feared in boardrooms and whispered about in society. He was brilliant, powerful, and completely unreadable. Emma had worked for him for nearly a year, but she still couldn't figure him out. He never smiled, never wasted words. So why was he calling her now? She hesitated before answering. Hello? Emma, my office, now. His voice was calm, controlled, but something about it sent a shiver down her spine. The call ended before she could ask why. Minutes later, she stood in his penthouse office, her damp clothes clinging to her skin. The city lights shimmered behind him, his silhouette dark against the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. Nathan's piercing blue eyes locked onto her, his expression unreadable. I know about your mother, he said simply. Emma stiffened. How? I know everything about my employees, he cut in. I also know you've been struggling, and I have a solution. She exhaled shakily. Mr. Hale, I appreciate the concern, but I can't marry me. The words were so unexpected that for a second, she thought she misheard. Nathan leaned back, completely unbothered by the weight of his own proposal. I need a wife, a convenient one. You need money, a lot of it. He folded his hands on the desk. It's a simple exchange. You become my wife, and your mother gets the best medical care available. No strings attached. Emma's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't a joke. But why? She whispered. His jaw tightened slightly, the first crack in his otherwise perfect mask. That's not your concern. Silence stretched between them. Everything in her screamed to say no. But then she thought of her mother's pale face, the helplessness in her father's eyes, the crushing weight of debt hanging over them. Nathan Hale was offering her a way out, but something about this felt too easy, too calculated. And when she finally whispered, okay, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. That was the moment Emma Carter sealed her fate, because she had just walked into a marriage filled with secrets, and one of them would change everything. The next morning, Emma stood in front of the towering glass building of Hale Enterprises, gripping the marriage contract in her trembling hands. She had barely slept. Her mind kept replaying Nathan's cold, calculated proposal, his unreadable expression as if this was just another business deal to him. She still didn't understand why. Nathan Hale was one of the most powerful men in the city, feared and admired in equal measure. He could have married anyone, a socialite, a celebrity, someone from his own world. But instead he had chosen her, a simple assistant drowning in debt. She wasn't naive. There was something else behind this, something he wasn't telling her, but she didn't have the luxury of doubts. Emma inhaled sharply and pushed open the doors. Inside, the entire office seemed to buzz with curiosity and quiet whispers. She could feel the eyes on her, the subtle glances between co-workers as she walked past. They had always treated her as nothing more than another assistant. But now she was Nathan Hale's fiancée. When she entered his office, he was already waiting, standing by the massive window that overlooked the city. He didn't turn when he spoke. Did you sign it? Emma swallowed, tightening her grip on the contract. I want to know why. Finally, he turned to face her. His expression was calm, his piercing gaze unreadable. Because I need a wife, and you need help. Does it matter beyond that? It did. Every instinct in her screamed that there was more to this than he was letting on. But she also knew Nathan wasn't the type to give answers freely. I don't want to be humiliated, she said quietly. Nathan studied her for a long moment before nodding. You won't be. His voice was firm, almost reassuring, but Emma knew better than to trust words alone. She placed the contract on his desk and signed her name. Nathan barely glanced at it. Instead, he stepped closer, lowering his voice. We're making this official tonight. I'll have a dress sent to your apartment. Be ready. Emma blinked. Tonight? We don't have time to waste. And just like that, it was happening. That night, as she stood in front of the mirror in an exquisite white gown, a sense of unease settled deep in her stomach. Because no matter how beautiful the dress, this wasn't a fairy tale. And she had a feeling that Nathan Hale's secrets were just beginning to unfold. The wedding happened in a blur. No grand ceremony, no guests, just a private exchange of vows in a courthouse. Nathan had arranged everything, efficient, precise, emotionless. He had even picked out her ring, a beautiful but simple diamond, as if even his choice in jewelry reflected the nature of their arrangement. After signing the final papers, Emma was officially Mrs. Hale, yet nothing felt real. Sitting in the back seat of his sleek black car, she glanced at the man beside her. He looked unbothered, focused on his phone, as if he hadn't just gotten married. As if this was nothing more than a scheduled meeting that had gone according to plan. She turned to the window, watching the city lights blur past. So what happens now? Nathan didn't look up. We act like a married couple when necessary. In public, you'll play the part. In private, nothing changes. Emma clenched her hands in her lap. And how long does this arrangement last? Nathan finally looked at her, his gaze sharp. 1 year. Her stomach twisted. He had everything mapped out, every detail controlled. But why? Before she could press further, the car pulled up to a towering penthouse. His home. Now hers too. The moment she stepped inside, she felt like an outsider. Cold marble floors, sleek black furniture, a space too perfect, too empty. It didn't feel lived in. It felt like a hotel, a place people passed through but never stayed. Nathan removed his jacket, tossing it over a chair. Your room is down the hall. Make yourself comfortable. And just like that, he disappeared into his office. Emma stood there, newly married but completely alone. Over the next few weeks, she played her part, attending social events, smiling for cameras, walking arm in arm with a man who barely spoke to her behind closed doors. Nathan was unreadable, always a step ahead, always keeping his distance. But the more time she spent in his world, the more she realized something was wrong. There were whispers in the office, uneasy glances from his staff. Nathan would take mysterious phone calls in the middle of the night, his voice low, guarded. And then one evening, she overheard a conversation, a name she didn't recognize, a threat she didn't understand. Nathan Hale wasn't just hiding something, he was running from something. Emma's unease only grew. Nathan's life was too controlled, too carefully structured, as if every move he made was calculated. She had spent weeks watching him, trying to understand the man she had married, but he remained an enigma, distant, unreadable. The phone calls became more frequent, late at night, always hushed, always urgent. He would step out onto the penthouse balcony, staring at the city below while speaking in clipped, tense sentences. Emma never meant to eavesdrop, but the few words she caught were enough to send chills down her spine. I said no loose ends. We can't afford mistakes. If they find out, he always cut the call short when he noticed her presence, but she could see it now, the cracks in his composure. The Nathan Hale the world saw was powerful, controlled. But behind closed doors, he was a man carrying a weight no one else could see. One evening, Emma decided she couldn't ignore it anymore. She stepped into his office, where he sat at his desk, fingers pressed against his temples. You're hiding something, she said softly. Nathan didn't react at first. Then he let out a slow exhale and leaned back in his chair, finally meeting her gaze. His eyes, usually so emotionless, were darker tonight, tired, wary. I told you not to ask questions, he murmured. Emma's heart pounded. And I told you I wouldn't be humiliated. Whatever this is, whatever you're involved in, it's bleeding into my life now too. I deserve to know. Nathan studied her for a long moment. Then to her surprise, he stood and walked toward her. For the first time, she saw something flicker in his expression, something close to vulnerability. You think you want the truth, he said quietly, but you don't. Emma swallowed. Try me. Before he could respond, a loud bang echoed through the penthouse. the sound of the front door being forced open. Emma gasped, spinning around just as heavy footsteps filled the air. Nathan was already moving. He grabbed her wrist, pulling her behind him as figures in dark suits stormed inside. Panic surged through her. This wasn't just a business deal gone wrong. Nathan Hale wasn't just hiding something. He had enemies, and now they had found them. Nathan's grip on Emma's wrist tightened as the men stormed in, their faces unreadable, their movements sharp and calculated. This wasn't a robbery. This was something else. One of them stepped forward, tall, dressed in a dark suit, his expression calm but dangerous. His eyes flicked to Nathan, then to Emma. "So, this is the wife?" His voice was smooth, too composed for the tension crackling in the air. Nathan didn't answer. His jaw was clenched, his stance tense, like a man ready for war. Emma's heart pounded. She had no idea who these men were, but Nathan did. The man smirked. "You've been avoiding us, Hale." He glanced around the penthouse, hiding behind business meetings, pretending like this little marriage changed something, but we both know it didn't. Emma felt the weight of his words sink in. This marriage wasn't just for convenience, it was a shield. Nathan had married her not to help her family, but to protect himself. Emma's breath caught. She wasn't just his wife, she was his alibi, his cover. Nathan finally spoke, his voice controlled but low with warning. "This isn't the time or place." The man raised a brow. "No, because from where I'm standing, it looks like the perfect time." One of the men behind him shifted, his jacket moving slightly. Emma's eyes locked onto the gun strapped to his waist. Her blood ran cold. Nathan noticed her reaction. He moved subtly, placing himself between her and them. "You're making a mistake," Nathan said, his voice quieter now, more dangerous. The man only smiled. "That depends on how cooperative you're feeling." He slid a folder onto the coffee table, tapping it once. "This doesn't go away, Hale, and neither do we." Then just as quickly as they had come, they turned and left. The door slammed shut behind them, leaving a silence so thick it was suffocating. Emma barely realized she was shaking. Slowly she turned to Nathan. "Who were they?" Nathan didn't move. His eyes were locked on the folder, his jaw set. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "What are you involved in?" Nathan exhaled, running a hand through his hair before looking at her. And for the first time since she met him, she saw fear in his eyes. "That," he murmured, "is something I never wanted you to know." Emma's pulse pounded in her ears. The weight of everything crashed over her. The marriage, the secrecy, the men who had just walked in like they owned Nathan's life. She had known something wasn't right, but now she was staring at the proof. Nathan exhaled slowly, his fingers pressing against his temples, as if trying to hold back the inevitable. Then, without a word, he reached for the folder. Emma watched as he flipped it open. Her breath hitched when she saw photographs, blurred images of Nathan, captured at different locations, meetings, handshakes with people she didn't recognize. Surveillance. Evidence. "They've been watching me for years," Nathan said, his voice tight, waiting for a mistake, a weakness. He looked up, his eyes dark with something she had never seen before. "You were supposed to be my way out." Emma's stomach dropped. "What?" Nathan's jaw clenched. "The marriage, it wasn't just about protecting you. It was about protecting myself." He shut the folder with a sharp snap. "A married man looks stable. A man in love looks untouchable. I needed a reason for the world to believe I was stepping away from the life I built. And you," he exhaled, "you were perfect for that." Emma took a step back, his words cutting deeper than she expected. "So, I was just a shield?" "No." His voice was immediate, firm, too desperate. "Not anymore." She stared at him, searching his face, looking for the cold, calculating man who had proposed a deal. But she didn't see him. She saw someone else entirely, someone unraveling. Before she could speak, the penthouse phone rang. Nathan didn't move at first. Then, with a resigned exhale, he answered. "It's done," he said into the receiver. His tone was steady, but Emma could see the tension in his shoulders. A beat of silence. Then a voice, low, unfamiliar, came through the line. "Not quite. Check your balcony. Nathan stiffened. Emma turned toward the glass doors, her breath catching as she saw a small red light flickering in the darkness. A sniper scope. Nathan grabbed her, pulling her down just as a bullet shattered the glass. Everything exploded into chaos. And in that moment, Emma realized Nathan hadn't just married her to escape his past. His past had followed him, and now it wanted them both dead. Glass rained down around them as Nathan pulled Emma behind the heavy oak desk. The sharp crack of another bullet echoed through the penthouse, splintering the bookshelf where they had been standing seconds ago. Emma's breath came in short gasps, her hands gripping Nathan's arm as he pressed her close, shielding her with his body. "Stay down," he muttered, his voice dangerously calm. He pulled a gun from the drawer. Emma had no idea he even kept one. But somehow she wasn't surprised. The sound of footsteps on the balcony sent a chill down her spine. Whoever was after Nathan wasn't just sending a warning anymore. They were here to finish it. Nathan moved swiftly, guiding her toward the hallway. "Get to the panic room," he ordered. Emma shook her head, heart hammering. "I'm not leaving you." His eyes met hers, something raw and real flashing through them. But before he could say anything, the front door burst open. This time, it wasn't the enemy. Armed security flooded in, weapons drawn, and within seconds, chaos erupted. Nathan shoved Emma behind him as a masked man on the balcony fired a last desperate shot before vanishing into the night. The security team gave chase, voices shouting orders into radios. Emma pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady her breathing as Nathan turned to her, checking her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to speak. Sirens blared in the distance. The nightmare was over, but the truth settled heavily between them. Nathan exhaled, running a hand down his face. "I never wanted this to touch you." Emma swallowed hard. "But it did." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Nathan nodded, as if accepting the weight of it. "I thought marrying you would keep me safe, that if I played the part of the settled man, they would leave me alone. But I was wrong." He hesitated, his voice quieter now. "I should have told you everything from the start." Emma searched his face. The man who had once been nothing but a mystery to her was now completely exposed. He wasn't just the cold, calculating CEO. He wasn't just the husband she had married for survival. He was a man who had been fighting demons alone for far too long. She took a slow breath. "What happens now?" Nathan looked toward the shattered glass, then back at her. "I fixed this. And us?" Something flickered in his eyes. "That's up to you." Emma studied him for a long moment. He had dragged her into a world of secrets, of danger, of half-truths. But somehow, through it all, she had started to see the man behind the mask. She didn't have all the answers. She wasn't sure if she even wanted to stay. But for the first time, Nathan Hale wasn't running. And maybe, just maybe, neither was she.